I spent 41 years building things that lasted. Fences, friendships, a family. I believed, the way a man only believes when he's never been truly tested, that the people you give the most to will never be the ones who take the most from you. I was wrong about that. Not a little wrong. Not mistaken in a way that you shake your head at and move on. I was wrong in a way that cost me money I'll never see again, dignity I had to fight to reclaim, and 1 full year of my life where I sat in my own kitchen wondering if I was losing my mind because my own son told everyone around me that I was. The thing that saved me wasn't anger. It was patience. And a lockbox nobody knew about. Welcome to Dark Dad's Revenge. I'm glad you found this place, and I'm glad you stayed. Pull up a chair, because this one's going to take a minute, and I think you'll want to hear every bit of it. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and the like button before we get going. It costs you nothing and it keeps this community alive. Drop something in the comments too, because I read them. Every one. Here, let me back up. My name is Gerald Marsh. I'm 71 years old. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, in the same house I've owned since 1989, 3 bedrooms, a detached garage, a side yard that I've always kept mowed whether I felt like it or not, because my father told me a man's yard is his handshake. I coached youth baseball for 16 years at Walter P. Taylor Park. Ran a 7-truck landscaping crew until I retired at 68. I go to First Baptist on Sundays, not every Sunday, but most. I volunteer at the food pantry on Magnolia Avenue twice a month. I am not a complicated man. But I will admit something to you. I have a blind spot. I always have. And it's love, specifically the love I carry for my children. I don't see them clearly when I love them. I see who I want them to be, and sometimes that person and the actual person in front of me are not the same at all. That blind spot almost destroyed me. Almost. I want to tell you about my son Derek now. Derek Ray Marsh. 44 years old. 6'1", built like a linebacker, voice like the bottom of a barrel. He could charm paint off a wall. Always could. His mother, God rest her, Louise, passed in 2019 from pancreatic cancer. She used to say Derek could sell sunscreen in Seattle. She said it like it was a compliment. Looking back, I think she was worried. I think she saw something in him that I refused to. I have 2 other kids. My daughter Renee, who lives in Asheville and teaches 2nd grade and is, in every way that matters, her mother's daughter. And my youngest, Marcus, who works construction in Chattanooga and never asks me for a thing. I'm proud of them both without qualification, without hesitation, without condition. And then there's Derek. I loved him just as much. Maybe more, if I'm being honest, because he was the one who always seemed to need more. Derek married a woman named Tamsin in 2015. Nice enough woman at first. 3 kids together, 8, 6, and 4 now. They bought a house out in Farragut, nice neighborhood, good school district, 4-bedroom colonial on Westland Drive. The mortgage was $2,240 a month. I know that number exactly. I know it exactly because starting in March of 2021, I was the one paying it. Derek had lost his sales job during COVID. That's real, that happened to a lot of people, and I don't fault him for that. But the job came back. The economy came back. Derek didn't come back. He took a lower-paying job at an HVAC distributor and said it was temporary, that he was building toward something, that he needed a little runway. A father hears that. A father who loves his son the way I love Derek, completely, stupidly, without eyes fully open, he writes the check. 26 months. That's how long I paid that mortgage. $58,240. I want you to sit with that number. $58,000 from my retirement savings. From the money Louise and I set aside for 35 years. Derek called it a loan. He never once put that word in writing. And then came Wednesday, March 8, 9:17 in the morning. I know the time because I checked my phone right after I hung up, just trying to make myself believe what I'd heard. I had called Derek to let him know I was planning to drive out to Farragut that weekend. I wanted to see the grandkids. The 4-year-old, Owen, had started doing this thing where he pretended he was a dog and crawled around barking, and I thought it was the funniest thing I had ever seen in my life. I wanted to sit on that floor and scratch his ears and let him lick my hand. Simple. Easy. Family. Derek's voice was different from the first second. Careful. Like he was reading from something. He told me that he and Tamsin had spoken with his cousins, his mother's sister's boys, who I have never been particularly close to, and that they were concerned about me. He said the word concern 4 times in that first minute. He said I'd been showing signs. Signs of confusion. Signs of forgetting things. He said I'd shown up to Marcus's house in Chattanooga last November and that I couldn't find my keys. That happened. I'll own it. I left my keys in the car and didn't know it for about 12 minutes. I was 69 years old and tired from the drive and I misplaced my keys for 12 minutes. That's it. That's the entire incident. But Derek had built a story around it. He told his cousins, he told his neighbors, he told people at his church. He told them I was declining. That I wasn't safe driving. That he'd been covering for me for months, protecting the family from the reality that Grandpa Gerald was losing his mind. He hadn't said a word of this to me directly. Not one word. He said it about me. There is a difference. A canyon of difference. And here's what he wanted from that phone call. He wanted me to agree, for my own safety, he said, to limit my visits. To call ahead, make sure someone was available to supervise. Supervise. I want you to understand something about that word. That is not a word a son uses for a healthy man. That is a word a son uses when he is building a case. Not concern. Not love. Not worry. Paperwork. He was still cashing my checks. The last one cleared on March 3rd, 5 days before he told me I was too senile to visit. I didn't yell. I want to be clear about that. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't curse, I didn't threaten. I said, I hear you, Derek. And I hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that. The garage was right through the door. I could smell the motor oil and the cedar shelves and the old coffee can I use for bolts. I've sat at that table 1,000 times, and it always feels like the center of something. It felt like the edge of something that day. I want to tell you about my neighbor Roy Cassidy now. Roy is 67, retired postal carrier, widower, the kind of man who salts your driveway before you wake up in a winter storm and acts like it's nothing. Roy had been watching all of this from across the fence for 2 years. He'd seen the checks. He'd seen Derek visit, which wasn't often. He'd seen the way Derek looked at my truck, my garage, my house on those rare visits. Like he was taking inventory. The week after that phone call, Roy came over with 2 cups of coffee and sat across from me at that same table. He didn't ask me how I was feeling. He said, Gerald, you know I love you like a brother. And I am telling you right now, as a brother, you need a lawyer. He slid a card across the table. Family law and estate attorney. A woman named Cheryl Doss whose office is on Kingston Pike. Roy had already called her. He'd explained the situation. She was expecting me. That's Roy Cassidy. That's what a real person does. If you've been listening for a while, do us one quick favor right now. Subscribe to this channel, it costs you nothing and it means everything to us. Hit the like button and drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story is hitting close to home, I want to know. We'll be right back into it. I walked into Cheryl Doss's office on March 15th at 2 in the afternoon. She was maybe 55, practical glasses, a yellow legal pad, no time for nonsense. She listened to me for 40 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, she said 3 things. 1. Derek had no legal authority to restrict my access to anyone unless a court granted it. 2. If he had been telling people I was mentally incapacitated without medical documentation, that was potentially actionable. 3. I needed to document everything going forward, and I needed to stop paying that mortgage immediately. I stopped the check that was already written. Called the bank that afternoon. $2,240 returned to my account. That was the last cent Derek Marsh would ever receive from Gerald Marsh. Cheryl helped me put together an informal loan documentation request, a formal letter to Derek asking him to acknowledge in writing the $58,000, the terms, and his repayment intention. She sent it certified mail. He signed for it on March 22 at 11:04 in the morning. He never responded to the letter itself. Meanwhile, I started keeping a log. Dated. Time-stamped. Every phone call, every text, every interaction. I wrote down the name of every person Derek had apparently told about my so-called decline. I contacted my own doctor, Dr. Anita Vora at University of Tennessee Medical Center, and I asked her to formally assess my cognitive health. Full evaluation. I wanted it on paper. She completed it on April 4, perfect scores. Not adequate. Not passable. Perfect. She signed off on everything, and I had 12 copies made. 12. I also reached out to my brother-in-law, Louise's brother Theodore, who lives in Oak Ridge. Theo is 73 and sharp as a tack and knew Derek since Derek was in diapers. When I told him what Derek had been saying to the cousins, his nephews, Theo went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Gerald, those boys told me something similar." I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't believe it, but I didn't know where it was coming from. He knew now. Theo called his sons that same night and told them the truth. Both of them called me within a week to apologize. I had already been working with my estate attorney, separate from Cheryl, a man named Paul Whitfield who has handled my affairs for 20 years, to review my will. Louise and I had written a joint will years ago. After she passed, I updated it, but some things hadn't been revisited. I sat down with Paul in late April and we revisited everything. Derek's share, which had been equal thirds with Renee and Marcus, was adjusted. It was not removed entirely. I am not that kind of man. But it was reduced. Significantly. And specific conditions were added around it that I won't get into here, but Paul understood exactly what I needed and he delivered it. On May 14, Cheryl sent a second letter. This one came with a copy of my cognitive evaluation, a documented list of the individuals Derek had reportedly spoken to about my mental state, and a formal notice that I was prepared to pursue a defamation claim if the statements continued. She also noted that the outstanding $58,000 had been documented and would be addressed through civil recovery proceedings if not acknowledged and addressed voluntarily. Derek called me the next day. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let that go too. On the third call, I answered. He was different. Quieter. That confidence was gone, that big barrel voice had gone thin. He said he wanted to talk. I told him I had nothing to hide and I was happy to talk, but I wanted to meet in person, not on the phone. He came to my house on May 19, a Thursday, at 6 in the evening. He sat at my kitchen table. Same table. He looked around the garage door, at the house, at the yard. I had nothing left to protect, and that made me the calmest I have ever been in my life. I did not offer him coffee. I did not start with small talk. I folded my hands on the table and I looked at my son and I said, "I need you to understand what you did." I walked him through it quietly. The $58,000 he had never put in writing. The phone calls he had made about my mind. The word supervise. The 5-day gap between his last cash check and his first phone call about my cognitive decline. I laid it out like a mechanic explaining what happened to an engine. Calm. Sequential. Final. He tried twice to interrupt. I held up one hand and I kept going. When I finished, I said, "I want you in my grandchildren's lives. I want Owen to crawl around on my floor barking like a dog. But I will not be spoken about the way you spoke about me. And I will not be used." He didn't say much. He said he was sorry. He said he didn't realize. I told him the documents were already filed and that the sorry didn't change the documents. He understood that. I watched it land. He left at 7:23. I watched his truck back out of my driveway. I stood at the door for a minute, then I went and sat in the garage and I put my hands on an old Chevy 350 block I'd been rebuilding for 3 years, just to feel something solid. I'm still working on that engine. I'm still here. Derek is currently in a repayment agreement, voluntary, because facing civil proceedings has a way of making people cooperative, paying back the $58,000 at $400 a month. It will take him years. That's fine. I'm patient. He gave me access to the grandkids again. Owen barked at me for 45 straight minutes last month. Best 45 minutes I've had in years. I'll leave you with this. My son thought he knew me well enough to rewrite who I was. He knew my checkbook. He never knew my spine. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of Dark Dad's Revenge. I'll see you on the next one.